Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and today we're taking a look at Game Week 9 and the wildcard that I am building across the international break. To start with, we'll just go over Game Week 8 results because it's been quite a while and we haven't done any videos since. Actually took a 4-point hit in Game Week 8 to swerve the last minute cancellations for the Queen's Memorial. And I sold Trent, Salah and Archer for a hit. I had 2 free transfers to bring in Trippier, Foden and Kane, which netted me a positive 23 points minus the 4-point hit, making it a positive 19-point swing, giving me a total of 59 for the game week, which is actually a 55 with the minus 4, which is 5 points above average. Happy days. It's got me 200,000 places up the ranks, and then as soon as the deadline kicked over for Game Week 8, I immediately clicked the wildcard button because I was planning to wildcard for Game Week 9. I was planning for it for about 3 weeks leading up to Game Week 9, and had to make a very, very marginal call on whether or not to take a hit or to actually use the wildcard in Game Week 8, but I saw a lot more upside working with the wildcard across Game Week 9 instead. And so with my initial trades on the very first weekend with my wildcard active, I actually managed to get rid of some players that were falling in value and jump on a couple, 1 or 2 I think that went up in value, and so I immediately gained 0.5 million into my team value to work with across the break. Now I've also got, at the moment, the team is sitting still not quite completely locked in. I'm waiting for Salah's price to drop from 12.9 to 12.8. He's been sitting on about 98% likelihood of being dropped for about the last 3 or 4 days. But because it's the international break and people aren't actually making trades out there at the moment, there's no price movements happening, and so it's more likely that that price will drop closer to the end of the week. So at the moment we've just got De Bruyne slotted in there at the moment. And it looks like with the trades that I am making that I should gain about 0.9 million or thereabouts for the full 2 weeks across the international break in terms of team value, which will, as you will see, help me get a pretty strong wildcard team heading through until Game Week 16 when the World Cup kicks off. And so at the moment, this team is mostly locked in, apart from De Bruyne is still sitting there. He's going to be Salah. He's still at 12.9, but he will be in at 12.8. And the other move that I'm looking at making is Martinelli out for Sinisterra. Now, to go across the wildcard team to start with, I'll just read out what it's. This is basically what the wildcard will be, with no major injuries or changes last minute. We've got Pope and net with backup being Everson. Everson being back up for a couple of reasons. I'm almost certain that Rodgers will drop Danny Ward at some point over the next few games. I mean, they are conceding well too many chances, and a big part of that is Danny Ward's performance. And Everson's at 3.9 is very cheap, so there's a double save. There's a saving on value there, but also the likelihood that I will have a backup playing keeper at some point later in the season. We have James, Cancelo, Trippier as my 3 defenders, who are all currently locked in on my wildcard, with the 2 remaining spots going to Nico Williams and Toney from Wolves. Toney won't play. He's just dead spot on my bench, but he is 3.9 million and not looking like he's shifting in value anytime soon. So it's more of just a place for a cheap player that's not going to drop in value, but also doesn't cut me off from any spots from a team that I might like. So I don't have many. I'm not looking at any Wolves players, and so chucking a Wolves player in there allows me the flexibility to select from all the other teams. In midfield, my locks are currently Zaha, Maddison, and Salah. These guys will all definitely be in on my wildcard. And probably the one main thing that I'm toying with at the moment is Martinelli out for Sinisterra. I'll go through that in a little bit more detail, but I am almost certain that I bought Martinelli at 6 million. He's now up at 6.6, and so when I sell him, I will immediately lose 0.3 million in terms of value. However, I think across the next 4 game weeks, we will probably see some sales in Martinelli anyway, and so by the time that I'm looking to get Martinelli back, I don't think he'll still be at 6.6. He might be down to like 6.4 million or something, and so I don't actually lose a hell of a lot across the trade. Could even fall further, maybe it doesn't fall at all, but I think across the next 4 game weeks for Arsenal, they've got the blank in game week 12, and 2 of the next 3 fixtures are actually quite hard. It's Tottenham and Liverpool at home, then they've got a great game against Leeds before they blank in game week 12. And across those 4 fixtures, I don't see a hell of a lot of returns for Martinelli. And so I am toying around with the idea of whether or not I do transfer him out and get him back in game week 13, or whether or not I just keep him in and hold on to the value. But with Leeds being quite an attacking outfit and a great run of fixtures for the next few games, they go Aston Villa at home, Crystal Palace away, then a tricky fixture against Arsenal at home, but then they have Leicester away and Fulham at home in the next 5. So 4 great fixtures across the next 5, when there are some pretty tricky fixtures for Martinelli in his spot instead. We have Andreas as my first bench member, first 4.5 playing, the only 4.5 million midfielder that will be playing in my team. We then have up front as the 2 locks, as obviously Haaland is going absolutely nowhere from my squad, and Mitrovic is also locked in despite his blank against Nottingham Forest last week. I think he is still the cheap man up front that should be in pretty much all teams at the moment. And then the third spot up front, which is kind of up for grabs, potentially, well, the third spot is either going to be another striker, or I could completely downgrade him and look to spend those funds in defense and upgrade elsewhere, which I will go to in a second. So, on a wildcard, the most points of contention that I can see is the goalkeepers. Goalkeepers seems to be quite a hard spot to fill at the moment. The most obvious choice I can see is Nick Pope at Newcastle. There's some other close contenders, which would be Guaita at Crystal Palace. However, Guaita has a couple of marks against his name as to why I don't want to get him in. There is a small chance that he may be rotated with Johnson, and we do not want to be playing around with goalkeepers that are potentially rotated. We do not want to be making any goalkeeper transfers until the unlimited transfers happens for the World Cup. And so I'm really looking for a set and forget keeper just for the remainder of this first half of the season. But also Crystal Palace defensively haven't been amazing so far. Now, they had a terrible pre-season with their team was just split up across the globe, so they don't work together too well, and they have had the last 4 weeks off total to work on any defensive issues that they have been leaking. But how much are they going to turn that around across this break? Who knows? That's a bit more of a punt for me, and with the added downside of the fact that Guaita might even be rotated, he was the only other option I was really looking at, as all the other 4.5 million options don't really scream to me to be anything worthwhile. It's actually probably worth going up to the 5 million or just over 5 million bracket. Now, I unfortunately missed the price rise on Nick Pope because it happened just before game week 8 when I was taking the hit. I was hoping that he would make it right the way through into my World Cup. It didn't quite, so I got him in at a slightly more expensive price. But Nick Pope just eats up bonus points. Like, Newcastle have a system where they do receive a lot of shots, but a lot of these shots are coming from outside the box, and so Nick Pope actually does make a lot of save points. And because the shots are coming from outside the box, they're not actually big chances that are going against the Newcastle team. And so Nick Pope, great keeper, playing in a pretty solid Newcastle outfit. as a set and forget for the remainder of the first half of the season seems like a no-brainer. And because I've made enough money in terms of transfers across the first 8 game weeks, holding on to value and jumping on price rises at the right time and selling players before they drop in value, I do actually have the funds to slot them in and slot them in relatively easily. Whereas I know other managers out there don't quite have the funds to go up to Nick Pope and are looking at other options like a Ward and Everson combo at Leicester, which if you want to put a keeper in that's going to get 1 point every week, then sure, so be it, with the real rare chance that they may get a clean sheet. But I just see Nick Pope's the extra money spent on Nick Pope, he is by far going to outscore these two keepers across the run up until game week 16. I hope. Now, in defence, as I mentioned, James, Cancelo and Trippier are all locked in. Now, Trippier means I do have a double up with Newcastle in defence. And Newcastle's fixtures aren't amazing for clean sheets across the remaining run. If we have a quick look at them, you'll see they play Fulham away, Brentford at home, Man United away, Everton at home, and then Tottenham away. I mean, these are not easy fixtures for clean sheets. However, Fulham and Brentford, we could see a clean sheet across those two, maybe a clean sheet against Everton at home. And then the run from 14 to 18 is pretty solid. Villa, Southampton, Leicester, Leeds are in there with a home fixture to Chelsea in game week 16. And so, although the clean sheets may not be as assured as potentially some of the other options out there, and doubling up may look maybe like a step too far, the reason I'm quite comfortable in doing this is Trippier is a set-piece monster with a great strike from outside the box. I suspect that he may pick up some clean sheet, some assists and even some goals in amongst the clean sheets that they may pick up across the run. And with Nick Pope picking up save points and potentially bonus when they do collect those clean sheets, then the double up isn't as bad because I'm not actually relying on clean sheets across this run. I've got multiple routes to points between these two players, even though they do play for the same team. And so I'm not at all worried about doubling up on the Newcastle defence. In midfield, Salah is pretty much locked into my team. I have flirted, though, with the thought of bringing in Sterling as an alternative option for Salah, because Chelsea's fixture run is actually amazing moving forward. They've just put Graham Potter in, who is a system-based coach and will probably shore up their defense, a little bit. But his attack is also quite systematic, and so you will probably find that a lot of the attack will fall at Sterling's feet, because he is probably one of the strongest attackers, if not the strongest attacker in the Chelsea outfit, and Graham Potter will know this and will try to get, I think, as much ball to him as possible in order for Chelsea to progress through and actually get some wins on the board and pull in the 3 points per week. And so Sterling does look like a pretty awesome option. The only problem is that we haven't seen much of the Chelsea outfit with Graham Potter at the helm, and so it is almost a complete shot in the dark as to how they're going to line up and what position he's going to be playing. He might even end up playing some sort of wing-back type role in that Chelsea outfit, or he may have to do a lot more defensive duties. And so without actually knowing how that's going to going out to play out, I think I'm a lot more comfortable spending the money on Salah to have him in for the options of the game week 9 and game week 12 captaincy. And so this game week we've got Man City playing Man United, and Haaland is a very strong captaincy option this week. However, Salah at home to Brighton seems like the higher ceiling fixture. I would say that if we were looking at the likelihood of, brace or hat trick for Haaland versus Salah, I would say that Brighton playing slightly more expensive football with their new manager in charge and a brand new manager, so they're still learning the system, seems like a much weaker opponent than Man United, who will be looking to probably play a lot more defensively against Man City in this fixture this week. And so, although Haaland could score and could even brace, even could get a hat-trick, I just think that the likelihood is that Salah may get, he's more likely to get the hat-trick this week, and so he is a very strong captaincy shout, and is why he is in my team at the moment. Now, Martinelli is probably the biggest point of contention. I've already mentioned that I am toying with the idea of getting him out. Sinisterra is a bit of a punt as well. He came into the Leeds team a little bit late. He got 6 minutes in the second fixture, then 20-30 before he got 63 against Everton, and then almost 60 minutes in the last game against Brentford, where they got absolutely smashed 5-2. But Sinisterra has been looking pretty tasty on the pitch. He looks like he loves to shoot. He's pretty accurate with his shots as well. He's buzzing in and around the box. And in my team, if you have a look at it, it's relatively template in terms of what a gameweek 9 wildcard would look like. I mean, more template would be to have Martinelli in here instead of Sinisterra. But I do want to have a punt on someone somewhere in my team to start gaining up the ranks. And I think most people will probably hold on to Martinelli because of the value that's tied up in them, and may not look to shift across to someone like Sinisterra, who does have, I think, a much higher upside across his run of fixtures, at least across the next 4, until we look at bringing in the likes of Arsenal assets to come back in game week 13. And then finally, the man up front, Toney, is the other main point of contention, I suppose. It either comes down to whether or not I go with Toney and play 3 up front, or actually drop him all the way down to someone else. I don't like the sound of Solanke, which I do know a lot of managers out there are looking at. I just do not want to own any Bournemouth attacking assets because I don't see them scoring a hell of a lot of goals. Toney is on pens. He's also on direct free kicks. And he's got a hell of a direct free kick on him as well. And Brentford's fixtures, Brentford are a pretty attacking team too, to be fair. I have owned Raya up until game week 8 and watched 1 point after 2 point after 1 point flow in because they just keep conceding. And so Brentford are going to need to score at least 2 goals per game in order to win, which bodes quite well for the likes of Toney up front. If we look at Brentford's fixtures, they play Bournemouth away, Newcastle away, Brighton at home. So that's 3 okay. Well, Newcastle's a bit of a tricky one, but that's 3 okay fixtures. They then have Chelsea at home, which is not great in game week 12. But then they have Aston Villa, Wolves, and Nottingham Forest. So right through to game week 15, the Brentford fixtures are pretty good. And if we jump on Toney with pens and direct free kicks with multiple routes to points against weaker opposition, I think this is the best spend of that 7 million spot across my team for the immediate short-term fixtures. Now, the glaring omission from my wildcard team here is Trent Alexander-Arnold in defense. I cannot find a way to fit him in easily, even if I did take out Toney and dropped him all the way down to a non-playing 4.5 Greenwood, someone like that. I still need to find a lot of funds because I've actually got Nico Williams and Totti in my defense in order to service the rest of my team. And so I need to find like 3.4 million somewhere. So I'd have to get rid of Toney and someone else in order to fund that move. And so that looks like holding on to a Martinelli, who is still at 6.3, so not spending the extra 6.2 to upgrade to Sinisterra, and to have Toney all the way down to a Greenwood who doesn't play just in order to get Trent. I think Toney and Sinisterra will probably score more points than a Martinelli and a Trent across the immediate set of fixtures, with the addition of I will have a bench member that does play in Nico Williams if I do go with the Toney and Sinisterra option. Whereas the other way of going would be to have Greenwood up front, and he is just a 1 point man. He will come on for maybe the last 10 minutes in a game if he's lucky, and so it's basically another dead spot, which would mean I would be running with Toney and Greenwood as 2 dead bench members in my team. To sit behind Andreas as my first choice bench option. And so I think in terms of overall team, it's pretty solid. It's relatively template in terms of what most wildcards will look like. It's also pretty close to a lot of what the Game Week 8 wildcard is ended up going with the obvious differences being Game Week 8 wildcarders might be a little bit lighter on Liverpool and potentially, might be lighter on Liverpool assets because they were one of the main teams that missed out last week, and which is why I sold both Trent and Salah for a hit. And so I am jumping the gun on most Game Week 8 wildcarders by having Salah in my team, who actually ends up becoming a differential at 35.2% owned in the game. That's ludicrously low for such a great player, and so I'm more than happy to pull him back in on a Game Week 9 wildcard. Set him in place for the run from Game Week. Is it Game Week 12 or Game Week 13? I think Game Week 12 when City and Arsenal blank. Salah's got West Ham at home, which is an okay fixture. It's not a great fixture, but it's pretty decent. And then they go Nottingham Forest, Leeds, Southampton, Villa, and Leicester for the end of the season. The end of the run up until Game Week 16. Sorry, not till the end of the season. Only having to go away to Tottenham in that run of fixtures. And the other thing to note, I think, is Liverpool haven't been great for the first 8 game weeks. However, a big part of that has been through injuries. Matip and Thiago are both back. They played in the last game for Liverpool before the break, or before the blank. Might have even been a UCL fixture potentially, but Liverpool just looked a hell of a lot better with those 2 players in the team, which is something I've been talking about over the last couple of game weeks, which is why I was quite happy to sell Liverpool without those 2 players in the team. But bringing them back now, because Matip makes a huge difference to that team, and it's simply because of the way that he walks the ball forward into midfield, creating a slight overload, bringing the opposition slightly out of their shape as someone has to go and shut them down, which creates us space somewhere. And Liverpool are so good across the pitch that they then exploit that space, and it can generate a pretty fluid attack. And without Matip in the team, and also without Thiago in the team, obviously controlling the ball in midfield, they have quite struggled to break down oppositions and actually get a lot of opportunities, and a lot of opportunities through to Salah. I suspect that will all change from Game Week 9 forward after the international break. All teams would have had a pretty solid rest period. The managers would have had a chance to sit back and have a look at what is working and what isn't working. And I think Klopp will look at it and go, we need to get Salah back shooting often in front of goal in order to start securing the 3-point victories that they have moving forward. Now, Liverpool's fixtures aren't ideal. As I said, they do play Arsenal and City in the next 3. However, these games are typically full of goals, and so Salah could quite easily come away with returns in both these fixtures, which is another also reason why I'm skipping out on Trent for these few fixtures, because I do see both Arsenal and City scoring against Liverpool, and so the only route to points for Trent would be his assists and goals, which are relatively strong because he's on so many set pieces and he is such a great player and can generate a lot of assists from open play. But without that clean sheet, playing the premium for him with the addition of the detriment to the rest of my team doesn't seem like the smartest play moving forward. So if we quickly have a look at the transfer planner, so I'll just run you through the next up to game week 12, which is when the blanks are, which is what this wildcard is basically covering, is covering game weeks 9 to 12, and then to reassess moving forward to game week 13. We've got Pope. We'll be playing Pope and Net against Fulham, James, Cancelo and Trippier against Crystal Palace, Man United and Fulham, Maddison against Nottingham Forest, Zaha against the tricky game against Chelsea, but he could quite easily score there, might even get a pen. Sinisterra plays Aston Villa at home, which is a great fixture for Leeds. Leeds are a very attacking team, and Aston Villa, although look to be trying to play a little bit more defensively, I do not know if they'll be able to keep Leeds out, and as soon as one goal goes in, it could just all fall over for Aston Villa. Sinisterra could come away with a few returns there. We have Salah against Brighton at home, Toney against Bournemouth away, Haaland against Man United at home, and Mitrovic at home to Newcastle, which is unfortunate because he is playing against both Pope and Trippier. But like I said, both Pope and Trippier, I am not necessarily banking on the clean sheets here. They do have other routes to points. Now, without any trades, if I move forward to game week 10, Pope then plays Brentford at home. We've got James against Wolves, Cancelo against Southampton, and Trippier against Brentford at home. So 4 home fixtures for my defensive players. We have Maddison playing Bournemouth away, which is a great fixture. Zaha at home to Leeds, which is a great fixture. Sinisterra away to Crystal Palace, which is a great fixture because Crystal Palace have been very leaky. Salah away to Arsenal. This game typically has goals, and so Salah could come away with some points here. Toney is away to Newcastle, which again is not ideal because he plays 2 of my defenders, but same rules apply as to last week. We have Haaland at home to Southampton and Mitrovic away to West Ham. So it does not look like I'm going to be making any trades this game week. We then come across to a tricky game week, which is game week 11, where Man City play Liverpool, and Newcastle also have Man United. So I've got Pope and Trippier both playing Man United and Cancelo away to Liverpool, which is not ideal, agreed, but when Man City play Liverpool, all teams out there are going to have to deal with this, and considering I am wildcarding and keeping the 3rd Man City spot and no Arsenal spots out of my team, I'm probably a little bit better set up for this than most game week 8 wildcarders. We've got Toney up front at home to Brighton and Mitrovic at home to Bournemouth. Now those are 2 great fixtures for my strikers. We also have I'm actually playing Andreas here against Bournemouth as well, potentially, and benching Sinisterra for the match against Arsenal at home. However, I could quite easily play Sinisterra in this game. This is just me tinkering around, seeing what my options were. So this is game week 11, 2 free transfers. Looking at this team, I may not want to make any trades here. I mean, that's quite a playable team. I mean, maybe a Trippier might be not looking as assured, but their fixtures moving forward I probably want to hold on to. I still have 0.1 in the bank, so my team is mostly a downgrade somewhere. I would have to downgrade someone or use the 2 free transfers in order to upgrade a player somewhere else. So I'm not too sure what I'm actually going to do in game week 11, but I've got a full playing 11 with a great backup bench member and Andreas playing Bournemouth at home. And then we go through to game week 12 with the blank for Man City. We have Haaland and Cancelo sitting on the bench. The full 11 out on the pitch is Pope at home to Everton, with Trippier also at home to Everton. We would have to play Nico Williams, but it is away to Brighton, and so that may not be as bad of a fixture, considering Brighton are looking to play a little bit more expensive football. Nico Williams is an attacking defender and could come away with something in that game. We have James away to Brentford. Maddison is at home to Leeds. Zaha is home to Wolves. Sinisterra is away to Leicester, which is another great fixture for Sinisterra, which is why I think this play could work out quite well across these 4 game weeks. We have Salah at home to West Ham. We do have to play Andreas Pereira at home to Aston Villa, but it is against Aston Villa, and Aston Villa haven't been amazing so far. We also have Mitrovic up front playing against Aston Villa too. And Toney with the only real tricky fixture at home to Chelsea in game week 12 to avoid the blank. And the squad still hasn't had any transfers made to it. So the wild card has actually set up my team to be playable across the next 4 game weeks, which does allow me the ability to do a little bit of upside chasing in terms of transferring around the big hitters. So the 2 games for Salah against Arsenal and Man City, I could look to switch out to the likes of potentially a Son or Sterling for a 2-week punt before bringing Salah back in and against West Ham in game week 12 when the City lads blank. And then from game week 13 forwards, there's some big games out there where a lot of points could be made, and so this is why you want to have Salah right and ready to come into your team if you do not already have him. So you do have to have a plan to get Salah back, because he is away to Nottingham Forest in game week 13. Haaland is at home to Brighton, Toney away to Aston Villa, Mitrovic away to Leeds, Sinisterra at home to Fulham, Zaha away to Everton, Maddison away to Wolves, James with a tricky fixture at home to Man United, Cancelo's home to Brighton, and then my 2 Newcastle lads do have a tricky fixture this week against Tottenham away, which might be the only issues that we're dealing with in game week 13. And the remaining fixtures for this team is actually quite strong. We won't go all the way through to game week 16, but this kind of goes to show what this game week 9 wildcard team will play like across the next 4 game weeks, which are probably the hardest fixtures to navigate before the World Cup wildcard in game week 16. And so that's how the wildcard is shaping up at the moment. Obviously there could be some late injuries or changes or anything come out of the woodwork, but that is the most likely wildcard team that I will be going with for game week 9. So if you have made it this far through the video, please do consider giving the video a like. And if you're new around here, hit that big red subscribe button to be notified about more FPL content coming your way soon. And until next time, I'll catch you again shortly. Cheers.